Let's imagine that you enroll in a class and you've heard great things about this teacher. So you enroll in the class, you show up in day one, teacher seems great, and the teacher hands out the syllabus. Pretty common. You start reading the syllabus and it outlines what you're going to learn that year and what you can be expected to learn. And then at one point in the syllabus it says teach student expectations or student requirements. And as you're reading that, your eyes sort of fall on one of the student requirements is student will be required to give a vital organ if and when the teacher asks. And you're like, whoo. Like, yeah, is this a joke? Is this a minceprint? The teacher said, no, if I ask you for an organ, I need you to give it to me. Like, okay, how do I drop out? So you drop out of the class. And then later you run into your friend. Your friend's like, hey, how's that class going? You're like, I dropped out. And he's like, why? Because the demands of the class were too much. It was going to take too much time. You're like, no, I think it was going to take my kidney. And that would be reasonable. Because that request, that demand would be too high. It's too much to ask of somebody in a class for a student. And I'm reminded of that today because in our gospel, it says that great crowds were traveling with Jesus and he turned and addressed them. Now, in the gospel, there are times when Jesus gives what can only be described as anti-pep talks. He turns around and he says things and you think, do you want anyone to follow you? Why are you talking like this? And today he turns around and says, if anyone wishes to come to me without hating his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Now, could Jesus really mean that we're called to hate, to have evil intent or malice towards our own family? He said a couple weeks ago in Luke's gospel that we're called to love our enemies. It would be crazy to love our enemies, but then to hate our own family. Now, we know Jesus can engage in hyperbole to prove a point. Most famously, he told you if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out, hand causes sin, cut it off. He doesn't mean that literally. Of course, he's proving a point. And in Hebrew, this idiom, to hate, means to prefer less. We see in the Old Testament where people offer two sacrifices to God. One will give the best of what they had. One will give less than that. He says he loves one and hates the other. He prefers one to the other. But what Jesus is saying is still shocking. He's saying that we have to love him above all relationships, even our own family. And the word disciple in Greek is mathetes, what literally means student or disciple. And Jesus is a teacher, he's a rabbi, but he demands of his students that he love them, that we love him above all things. And in the Old Testament, familial obligation was very important for Jews. But there was one thing that could require a loyalty above family relations in the Old Testament, and that was God. That was Yahweh. And so for Jesus to ask this, he's implying that he is divine. He's on par with God to ask for this kind of loyalty and devotion. And then he goes on to say, to give these two analogies about constructing a tower or going into battle. You would first calculate the cost, or you decide whether you can win the battle, or you would stop the building, or you would send peace delegation. And then he ends by saying this, in the same way, any one of you who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. Now we could sum this up quite easily. We could just say this. What does it cost to follow Jesus? Everything. That's what it costs to follow Jesus. There's an old saying that unless Jesus is the Lord of all, he's not the Lord at all. And Jesus is laying out the conditions of discipleship, the requirements of discipleship. There's a famous Christian martyr named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he said when Jesus calls a man to himself, he bids him come and die. Whoa. Give up your life for me. And the question is, friends, have we done this? Have we surrendered our life to the Lord? Can we say, Jesus, I'm going to love you when things are hard and when things are easy, in moments of resurrection, moments of crucifixion, when I'm on a peak or when I'm in a valley. Jesus, I'm all in. I'm totally committed to you. Can you and I say that? And we think, well, this is so extreme, but if you think about it, the image on earth that we have of the relationship between Jesus and his church is marriage. So we could ask this question: why would anyone get married? Why would somebody write a blank check to another person and they don't know what it's going to cost them? And they say things like, I so-and-so take you so to be my wife, in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, to love you and honor you all the days of my life. And they don't know what that's going to cost them. Why would anyone do that? And the answer is because we're built for committed love. That's what our hearts are built for. And when you think of it in those terms, then really what Jesus is asking, it just follows the logic of love, that he asks to be loved above all things. I just want to say a word about the three things he says. Number one, more than possessions. Now, as the church has classically understood this doesn't mean that every follower of Jesus has to renounce all their possessions. There, of course, are people that do that. There are religious sisters, religious brothers that take vows of poverty. I took vows of simplicity, which is why I can own a Toyota Camry. Okay. I didn't want to brag. You brought it up. Okay. But of course, people who are religious, they take vows of poverty. They don't own anything. They own everything in common. But the Catechism says this about every Christian. Jesus enjoins his disciples to prefer him to everything and everyone, and bids them renounce all that they have, for his sake and of that of the gospel. The precept of detachment from riches is obligatory for entrance into the kingdom of heaven. Whoa. And detachment means that we own things they don't own us. And that when push comes to shove, we would be willing to give them up out of love for Jesus. And one of the ways we concretely prove that to ourselves is we give alms. We give to the poor, we give to the church. It's an act of worship to God. And it shows a detachment from our wealth, that it doesn't own us, but we own it. The second is more than family relations. And unfortunately, we often experience this when somebody in our family starts to get off the path of truth. And the question is do we want to love them back into the truth? And not fall into this fuzzy, unloving thinking of our culture of like, well, they're sincere and, you do you. No, we should always love our family no matter what, but we want to love them back into the truth. Because here's the deal. I would argue you can't actually love anyone in your family the way you ought unless you love Jesus more than them. My friend Amanda, when she got married, right before she got married to her husband, she said to him, does it bother you that I love someone more than you? She said that to her husband. She was talking about Jesus. And he said, no, because I love someone more than you. He loves Jesus, And so the point is that what's best for everyone in your family, and if love is to will the good of the other, is that they become saints. What that means is that you have to love Jesus more than them, so that you can love them always into the truth. And the last thing, Jesus says more than life itself. I don't know this, in the 20th century, there were more Christian martyrs than in every other century combined. And since we live in America, we think like, times of terrible Christian persecution are over, but it's not true. There are people being killed today in Nigeria for standing up for the Catholic faith. There's terrible persecutions of Christians in China because of the Christian faith. And that may not happen to us in America, but there is a cost, of course, to following Jesus, to be labeled a fanatic, to be ostracized, and so on and so forth. But friends, in the end, this is how Jesus loves us. It's not calculated. He gives everything on the cross. And he's asked that we give it back. Totally. And how different would our world and our culture, our country, our neighborhoods, our schools, our places of work, our families, if we had that kind of love of Jesus, if we were that committed? Because I don't know about you, but when I was thinking about being fully into my faith, when I was a Catholic who was kind of like in the middle, and I would have said I was Catholic, but I couldn't say that Jesus was the center of my life, that I was totally committed to him. What made me want to do that was meeting Catholics who were totally committed to Jesus. And there was something about their life that was very compelling to me. They weren't perfect, but they were totally committed. And they were all in. And that was compelling. Could I do that? Could I be all in for Jesus? I want to close by asking this question. What did it cost God the Father to love you or to rescue you? And the answer is everything. It cost him everything. Because he only knows how to give one thing, which is his son, Jesus, his only begotten son. And through his death and resurrection, he's given everything for you. And today in the gospel, through the logic of love, he's asking that we would return that love by his grace, which is why, what does it cost to follow Jesus? everything.